US President Donald Trump has this week continued to perpetuate the false narrative when he met with South African delegates led by President Ramaphosa. Minority of Afrikaners who recently migrated to the United States of America have been labeled by critics as opportunists. The group's settlement was made possible by Trump's administration, which relied on false information that there is a white genocide in South Africa. Joining us is Professor Roger Southall, who's a professor of sociology at the University of Witwatersrand. A very good evening to you, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Lots to be said about that meeting that took place in the Oval Office, but I want us just to start on Trump's stance when it comes to doubling down on the misinformation, the disinformation, and all the falsehoods as well. The world, not just South Africa, post that meeting, has refuted those claims. Media houses from local and international have refuted those claims. But does it matter? Will Trump continue to believe whatever he wants to believe? And if so, what does that mean for US and South Africa relations?
Well, there's a lot in there. Look, I think the whole thing was set up as a spectacle. It was set up to show the strong man was dominating the weaker man, and I think it in many ways it seems to have backtracked, I think, on Trump, because the accusations were so ludicrous. And Cyril Ramaphosa's response was basically so dignified that I think that apart from the particular Trumpist audience, his white nationalist based basically, I think everybody knew that this was a setup. And I think the sympathy has gone to South Africa and to Cyril Ramaphosa. I think, you know, what is problematic is that when President Trump opens his mouth, we do not know whether he knows the truth. We don't understand whether he understands his own lies. Is he a victim of them? Increasingly, we simply do not know. And it's very interesting that recently the White House has taken down daily postings of the speeches of Donald Trump. Now, usually these are posted every day of all the speeches that US presidents make. But only in the last couple of days, my information is that they have been taken off, seemingly, presumably because they are such rambles, or that people will be able to trace eventually what he was saying. And we know very much that President Trump does not like to be fact-tracked. So I think we are in a very peculiar position where the US is misusing its soft power, relying on hard power, and I think it is, as I say, rebounding. And I think what the contra-Trump in the White House showed this week was a very dignified President Cyril Ramaphosa, and I think the esteem he will be held in internationally has increased.
And while that also may be the case, Prof, as well, when it comes to the Afrikaner refugees that are being resettled in the US as well, the some 49, of course, there's more who've also applied as well for this refugee status as well. Does this, what happened in the Oval Office then, kind of validify the need for this kind of an approach, even though it has been made clear that there is no white genocide?
Well, I think it's important that this whole myth of a white genocide be put to the sword, basically. And I think it's very difficult to condemn individuals if they take an opportunity to move out of a very difficult personal situation. But what one does object to is anybody doing that using a totally false narrative, which is insulting not only to South Africa and the South African people, but is insulting to genuine refugees across the entire globe. And the whole genocide thing at the moment is particularly sensitive because of what is going on in Israel, Gaza. And for these people to be called refugees, call them immigrants if you like, but to call them refugees is really beyond the pale.
And this is going to continue, though, Prof. Southall, because this program, this opportunity by the White House, by Donald Trump, still stands, regardless of the meeting that took place between the two heads of state. He wasn't swayed otherwise. He didn't seem to imply in any way whatsoever that they will re-look at this process. It seems it will continue.
I think protests about this will continue. I don't know whether the immigration is going to continue. We shall see. I imagine this is very much a temporary phenomenon, and I suspect that soon the Trumpists will soon pass on to something else. There may be, I think, a further dribble of people who the US selects from those wanting to leave. It will select those it think it can use and think it can settle. But I think the newsroom will soon move on, and as I say, President Trump will move on to something else.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Professor Roger Southall. Really appreciate it. That is the Professor of Sociology at Wits, Professor Roger Southall.